like, oh, sorry you couldn't get into OU or something like that. But it's a great rivalry. Went to Oklahoma State, got an accounting degree, and kind of a unique part about my story is the way I paid my way through college. And the way I did it was I sold books with the Southwestern Company. And it's a door-to-door sales job, great sales training. I did really well my first year, came back, recruited all my college buddies, all my buddies from OU. By the time I graduated from college, I had 50 college kids working for me. So it was my first experience of kind of leading a sales organization, and I found out that I loved working with my friends. I was really entrepreneurial, wanted to have my own business. So then I moved to Tulsa and first got into aviation. I'm a pilot, love flying. Met my wife, Sarah, in Tulsa. We've been married now for 20 years, and we have 6 children, from 17 down to 4, 3 boys and 3 girls. So Sarah apologized she couldn't be with you this morning. She loves coming out with me on the campaign trail. And when you meet my wife, Sarah, you will want her to be your governor. Trust me, she's amazing. But then I got in the mortgage business shortly after college, started my company, just like a lot of entrepreneurs. I didn't have many resources and started with $1,000 in a computer back in 2000. And now today, I've lived the American dream. We employ 1,200 people. We have about 165 offices all over the country. We actually do business in 41 states. One of our divisions, we buy loans from banks and credit unions. If you've ever had your home loan sold, that's where we come in and buy home loans. Then you're a customer for life with us. So that's just been my whole world, the last 18 years. It's always been about, hiring people smarter than me, putting them in the right positions, leading, setting the vision and the strategy. So why am I running for governor? So about 24 months ago now, I started thinking about this governor's race, and ultimately, as a man of faith, I feel like the Lord just put it on my heart to get involved. I've never been, ran for office before. That's the best way for me to personally describe it. But then, practically speaking, I started opening my eyes as I would travel and visit our different offices, and I would go down to visit our offices all over Texas, and I started seeing this momentum and the positivity, and the economy was booming down there. Then I would go visit my offices in Arkansas and Tennessee, and I noticed the same thing. Then I would come back to my state, the state that I grew up in, and I realized we haven't grown like the other states around us. And then I started looking at our education system. And did you know we're ranked 45th in math scores and reading scores? And we're going to 4-day school weeks in 20% of the districts. And I look at the budget problem we've been having over the last 6 years. And then I started looking, okay, who's going to lead us out of it? Who's going to be our next governor? And I started analyzing the resumes of the guys that were running. And I realized that they're all nice folks, but it was the same resumes as the previous administrations. And it just looked like we were going to be in the same situation 8 years from now if we kept electing the same politicians. And so that's why I'm running. I want to take off from my company, go serve my state, focus on the next generation and not the next election. Because, folks, if we don't have a governor that's independent, that's thinking about what's best for all 4 million Oklahomans, what happens is they're so worried about getting reelected or their next job or their next placement, they never really make a decision against this industry or this special interest group or this entrenched interest or lobbyist. And I'm going to be the governor for all 4 million Oklahomans, always focusing on what's best for everybody. It's the way we all run our businesses. We can't be just in love with one department over another department over another department. We've got to think about moving the whole team forward. And so I want you to kind of think as we're going through the Q&A session, what is a governor supposed to do? What is the job of the governor? And what is their resume supposed to look like? And what do you want in your next governor? And I'll give you my thoughts, because I think the governor should be able to put the plan together and set the vision and hire the right people and get the legislature all moving in the right direction. And the problem that I see is the guys that we normally hire have never really set strategy or led or hired people. And we have to do that every day in the private sector. And so I've been doing that for the last 18 years. And that's why I think I'm the most qualified to be the next governor. And my vision for the state, it's real simple. It's for us to be a top 10 state. And I believe we can be top 10 in growth, top 10 in education, and top 10 in infrastructure. And I've got 5 pillars that I want to lead us with. And it's a growth plan, education, health, infrastructure, and efficiencies. And what I get excited about is I don't think that we have any different issues in Oklahoma than they have in any other state. So that's what I get so frustrated, and all the people I talk to in all 77 counties, if we don't have any different issues than they have in Tennessee or Texas or Florida or Indiana, then why are we ranked 45th in all these different outcomes? And why are we number 1 in incarceration rates? And that's the biggest problem I see. I mean, I love the example that me and Steve Largent came to visit me in my office, and we were talking about all the issues Oklahoma was facing, where we rank, and all these different things. And he said, "You know what, Kevin? I ran for governor 15 years ago." And he goes, "We're talking about the same issues today as we did back when I ran. We haven't done anything about them." And folks, I want to be the governor that actually does something about them. And that's my kind of promise, is I'm going to always be focused on moving our state forward. And, that's why I want to be your next governor. So with that, I want to open it up, stop for a second, open it up to questions and comments on exactly what you guys want to hear about. Let me just tell you my rural roots real quick before we start there. So my mom's dad, Blue Williams, had an 8th grade education, was a dairy farmer in Skiatook, Oklahoma. So he was my hero. Anytime I feel sorry for myself that I'm working too hard, I think about Granddad. And he had to get up at 3 in the morning every single morning, 7 days a week. He never got the weekends off. And so he's kind of my hero. That's where I spent my summers, hauling hay and hanging out with Granddad. And then my other granddad, my dad's dad, was the head vet at Oklahoma City Stockyards for 25 years. So he retired in the 80s. His name was Marvin Stitt. He had the contract with the Oklahoma City Stockyards. So any guys that sold cattle through there in the 70s and 80s would remember my granddad, Doc Stitt. So we also live on some acreage. I have cattle and love that type of environment and want to raise my kids with those type of values. So I understand those values for sure. So with that, let me open it up to questions and comments from you folks. One at a time, please. Yes, sir.
Governor, our government is made up of 3 branches.
Mm-hmm.
So understand your vision, but how are you going to work with the legislature and the judicial branch also?
Yeah, great question. I know I can't do state government by myself. It's going to take all of us to turn our state around, not just working with the legislature, but really all of you folks. And I'm going to be inviting some of you to come serve with me temporarily in state government, because I think that's what our forefathers envisioned. They never thought about career politicians. They thought somebody would temporarily leave their farmer business, go serve their state, and come back to the private sector. So I have to lead those guys. And I've called all 101 House members and all 48 senators, and I've started asking them, how can I do a better job when I get there? And you know what they tell me? Every one of them tells me, Kevin, have a plan and meet with us. Come hang out with us on the 4th floor. They go, we never see the governor. We don't know what the plan is. And folks, without a plan, you know what happens today? There's 150 of them, House and Senate members. They throw in 2,500 new bills every single January. Did y'all know that? 2,500 bills coming in from every single direction. I can't even think of 2,500 things to do, right? And until you have these 5 pillars and you have, here's what we're going to do in growth this year to be the most growth-oriented state. Here's how we're going to deregulate, make sure we get regulation off business. And here's what we're going to do in education. Here's what we're going to do in the healthcare system. Until you have that plan and then you lock arms and you go execute on it, that's how you do it. That's how we do it in the private sector. And that's how I plan on doing it as governor. But I've got to work with those guys. And I'm going to put metrics in place to show everybody in the public and all of the Oklahomans, like, here's where we rank right now in growth compared to other states. And here's where we're headed to. Here's where our goal is for top 10. And then you guys are going to help me keep everybody motivated and keep the pressure on the legislature to actually act and move. And I'll take one other example that I think is frightening. In our state, there's 11 different elected statewide officials, right? So you've got the attorney general and the superintendent of schools and the labor commissioner and the insurance commissioner, the state auditor, right? They're all separately elected. I've met them all now on the campaign trail. And I asked them, kind of tell me how it works on the inside. How do you work with the governor? How does she lay out the vision for the state? And how do y'all go, how does it all work? Tell me. And they said, Kevin, we haven't met together except one time over the last 8 years. And that was a dinner party. And I'm like, I just throw up my hands. I'm like, well, no wonder. If you didn't meet with your executive team but once every 8 years, there is no plan, there is no direction, there is no execution. And folks, the future doesn't just happen. We make our own future. And that's what I get excited about, because again, I've said it before, we don't have any different issues any other state does. There's a rural versus urban and a Republican versus Democrat in Arkansas and in Tennessee and in Nebraska. So if I'm 45th in something, you can't use that as an excuse. We are going to be moving forward in all these different categories. And I think Oklahoma has all the bones to be a great state. And we can talk about that in a second too. But we've got a great opportunity to grow our state. We really do. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My first question is, if a state question is voted upon by your people in this state, and you take that question and you butcher it to make it to a personalized agenda, would your administration allow that, or would you go by what the people voted?
So I think you're trying to bait me into some kind of marijuana question. I'm not sure, but
It's not a bait. It goes for anything, because if you could do that on that level, what would you do for other questions? Because it's by the people for the people. If the people voted for something,
yeah,
it should be respected.
yeah.
So, what would you do in that regard?
So the 788 question, I've been from the very beginning, I've told everybody that nobody is against medical marijuana. And if it's going to help a patient, everybody's fine with it. Here's what I do. Here's how I think about things. I went and met with a pain management clinic, and I talked to the two doctors there that own it. And I said, does this help people? Would you actually prescribe marijuana? And you know what they said? They said, yeah, in certain situations, we would prescribe it. It would get people off opioids. They said we've never prescribed the smoking kinds. We think that harms people's lungs. But they said we would prescribe it. So nobody's against that. But recreational puts our state in too many unintended consequences. It's still illegal federally. The businesses I talk to, how do they sell across state lines? How do they keep a safe environment? The banking system, insurance costs have gone up in the state of Colorado because of that. So yeah, but to answer your question broadly, when the people vote on it as governor, I've got to go execute and make sure it is. But it was a medical marijuana bill, so I know that they're still working through kind of how they're going to manage that and how they're going to regulate that. As governor, I'll bring the right people around me and all the people at the seats at the table, whether it's businesses, how they deal with it, whether it's the healthcare system, how they're going to have to deal with it and how to administer it. But if it's medical, nobody is against that. We're just against the recreational use in our state because it puts our state in too many unintended consequences. Yes, ma'am.
So if you can trim that, get a new bill out, how are you going to get the Republicans out to vote for it if you get it on a ballot?
You know, the thing, everybody hear that question? Basically, the problem that I had with the way the whole thing, there was no leader. Nobody's, the governor should be explaining, and I should have the trust when I become governor of all the people of Oklahoma. So I can explain how the sausage is made. And I can come to every county with the microphone and I can say, guys, nobody is against medical marijuana, but this bill looked way too much like recreational. Here's what's the problem with it. We need to tighten it up here, here, and here. And I can go to the people and explain that. Nobody's going out and being the spokesperson and the leader of the state. That's what I think you're electing as your next governor. And I want you to know that that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come back to Altus. I'm going to explain, here's what's happening. Here's why we need to do this, this, or this. And hopefully I gain the trust in all 77 counties. That's why I'm the guy that's been to all 77 counties. And I'm going to come back to Altus and Lawton and Southwest Oklahoma over and over again as governor. Yes, ma'am.
Could you talk to us about what your plan is for education?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, from the very beginning, I've been telling people we have to pay teachers what market is, competitive salaries, right? To me, what is market? Market is what the other states around us that we compete with do. What do they do in Texas, Kansas, Arkansas, Colorado, right? So we've got to pay teachers what market is, competitive wages. If I hired underwriters at my company, didn't pay competitive wages, it doesn't go very well. If you hire people at your companies, you have to pay competitive wages. That's one lever we have to do, right? But the big picture is, how do we fund this long term? So we actually fix this in 2025 and 2030. Because we've been told as Oklahomans all our lives that the casinos were going to fix education. Y'all remember that? The lottery was going to fix education. Liquor by the drink, horse racing. We've heard all these things, right? So how do we do it long term? The last governor that addressed the funding formula was Henry Bellman. Okay, that's how long it's been. I think we have to relook at how we fund education and look at how other states are doing it. Because in our state, there's two distinct buckets. You've got capital improvement bucket, meaning new buildings, new infrastructure. Then you've got operations budget, salaries, paper, books. We need to combine those two buckets like other states do and allow the local counties to spend their money how they need to. But education, and then there's technology and there's innovation. There's other things we can use from other states. But I want to touch real quick, just for because time's sake. Education's bigger than just Common Ed, right? You've got K through 12 Common Ed, then you've got career techs. They used to call them VOTEX when we were in high school, and then you've got higher ed, right? nobody's working together. It doesn't seem like we have a real good structure to get our kids ready for the workforce. And I applaud your career tech system here. I visited Altus Air Force Base one of the previous trips, and they were telling me that the career techs here are training A&P mechanics to feed right into the Air Force Base. But other parts of the state that they're not aligned with industry as well as they are here in Altus. And I hear horror stories all over the state about manufacturers and business owners that are trying to hire machinists and welders, and they can't find them, right? Well, did you guys know that a welder can make $100,000 a year and a machinist can make 90? And we have to start training them, the career techs and the common ed, because only 45% of our high school kids are actually going to higher ed. Okay, and it's like everything is focused on that, and only 45% of the kids go there. So what are we doing with the 55%? And we have got to show them a career path, great career path, right? So education always starts with a vision and a goal. And my goal and vision for Oklahoma is for us to be top 10 in education. So everything is on the table for me, and I will whiteboard this thing and get it fixed and move it to top 10. Yes, sir.
On the process, all the finances, you can throw money at schools all you want to, but Oklahoma is, a lot of it is the structure. We're from a small town. Everybody wants a small town school. You can't sustain the money. I don't care how you divide it, it's not going to be enough. That's the toughest thing with the state. In my personal opinion, I've been a lot of other state people say, well, let's compare. When Oklahoma has too many schools, and in our county alone, we could combine schools, but nobody wants to. Everybody wants their own community school, which is great, but nobody wants to pay.
Yeah.
And so what some decisions that might be, that's the tough ones that's going to come.
Yeah.
There's not enough income to do it the way it's done now.
Well, you bring up a really important point. Back to the funding formula. I think the funding formula fixes that. And because when we can leave money in the local counties decide how they're going to do it. Pittsburgh County over in McAllister, I was over there yesterday, 35,000 people in the whole county, okay? That's where McAllister is. They have 13 different superintendents, okay, with 35,000 kids. And so basically, when we tweak this funding formula, every business has a metric, right? If I'm a banker, I can't open up a new branch without getting a certain amount of deposits. In my industry, every industry has one. I'm familiar with my industry. Obviously, I don't want to spend more than $650 per employee in rent cost, right? It'd be foolish for me to open up the Lawton, Oklahoma office of Gateway and spend $10,000 a month in rent, only have 2 employees there. I can't do enough loans to justify that, right? Well, some of our districts are really efficient. They spend $6 per kid in administration costs. Some of them spend as much as $900 a kid in administration costs. So I think you need to look at what market is, what other states are doing, how they're getting those dollars in the classroom, and then you tweak the funding formula to fix that. But really, it's a local county decision. Pittsburgh County needs to decide, do they need 13 different superintendents? And I'm not talking about the schools. I'm just talking about the administration level first. Or do they need 5 or 15 or 10? But I think when we can tweak the funding formula and let them control more of their own money instead of the state equalization formula, I think that'll fix it. Then Texas has a Robin Hood part of their formula as well that doesn't let some of the poorer districts be left behind. So we have to have that. But right now we're so equalized. Now there's zero incentive for any city or any county or any school district to become more efficient. We have to align. We know that in business. We have to align the incentives and get everybody moving to where we need them to move. Because our legislature sets the minimum salary. Okay, minimum salary for teachers is set by the legislature. And our minimum salary was already higher than Texas's, even before this last pay raise, right? But Texas obviously pays their teachers way more than us because of the funding formula. And again, guys, this is more like running a business than anything. I don't have to invent Google or Yahoo. I've got to simply deliver great services through 120 different agencies in state government better than everybody else. And that's what I get excited about. And talking about that budget real quick, I want to bring that up. So we spend $22 billion in our state. Okay. I'm excited because actually the revenue is looking like $1 billion more next year. We're going to spend we're going to have $23 billion. It looks like we're going to have a surplus. The legislature only controls $7 billion. So they always argue and fight about how they're spending $7 billion without any control over the $15 billion. And I believe the governor has got to have more control over these 120 agencies. to create accountability and transparency in how those dollars are spent. Because until we get that, we're going to always take money from this county and spend it over here and take it from this department and spend it here. And we have got to put performance metrics in place. A business person knows how to do that. Not that I have all the answers, guys, but I'm a much better CEO today than I was when I started with $1,000 in a computer. And that's why I'm a different type of a governor and somebody that will actually go in and hold these guys accountable and understand how to deliver services for you and Altus. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I did. Yeah, I did meet with them. What he's talking about is the land office. So every state, man, this is the greatest history lesson ever running for governor. I'll tell you that. All right. I'm learning all these things, right? I've been slinging mortgages for the last 20 years. So what he's talking about is the land office. And so basically when we became a state, and every state was like this, the federal government gave our state and set aside all this land. And they said it's only be used for promoting education. Okay, so that's what it was for. Our fund is around $4 to $5 billion. So there's part of the money is invested, okay, in the stock market. Over the years, they've sold different assets. Part of it's still land that they lease out, et cetera, et cetera. The bigger question is transparency, accountability, and a business person understanding that there's accountability and how is that money being invested and used and making sure that income is going back to the school districts. So it would be an act of Congress. We'd have to change laws to be able to sell and close that down. I don't think any state has ever done that. So the real picture, the real deal is you're hiring the governor that understands business and understands investments and how to make sure we're capitalizing on that, what fees we're paying to the outside people to monitor that and getting those dollars back into our school district. So that's about the extent of what I know about it right now. But the problem is you need the governor to put the right person in place. Because folks, whether you're the governor or the CEO, you can't dig into the weeds on every single different issue, right? That's why it's called management. You've got to learn how to hire the right people. And that's why I think I'm the right guy for the job, because I've been doing this my whole career. Yes, sir.
I believe here in our state that across the nation, really, that we're lacking in manufacturing. We're not making stuff. And I believe that all jobs are important, but many jobs fall in line with that. You have manufacturing, you bring in more. We seriously lack that in this community directly. So do you have a plan of action to not only protect what manufacturing jobs we do have, but to attract new businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, growing a state is blocking and tackling, just like it is in the private sector. You got to have a plan. You got to look at what are your strategic advantages. And I think about what's Oklahoma's strategic advantage. Then I look at the national economy, what's going on around us. Unemployment is some of the lowest level it's been nationally. Trump just cut the corporate tax rate from 35 to 21. That was a huge move. If you'd have told me he could have got that done, I'd have said there was no way. Well, if you'd have told me he was going to get elected, I'd have probably said there was no way. But what does that do? That kind of leveled the playing field internationally. So now there's a move to repatriate dollars. There's a move to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. And I believe Oklahoma has a great opportunity to capture this growth over the next 10 years with the right governor. We've got all the land. We've got the natural resources, the utility prices. We have the best location of any state in the country. We are dead center located in the middle of the U.S., okay? To me, we should be number one in manufacturing, number one in distribution, number one in aerospace. We're like 1,000 nautical mile ring from any spot in the U.S. It's the best. It's the perfect location. We just need like commerce. I've talked to the commerce department people that worked in the David Bourne administration all the way through the Fallon administration. And did you know we used to have commerce departments in higher tax states? We used to have offices in California recruiting businesses that would be better located here. We had offices overseas. And then we tried to save money and contract right when Texas and Arkansas starts expanding commerce. So I'm going to bring that back. I've talked to the guys that privatize the commerce in Florida, and I think there's an opportunity to explore that. So again, it's coming back to having a plan. And I've heard horror stories. I'll tell you one quick story. Well, we don't have time for it. You want to hear it? It's the Daisy BB gun story. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I get on these tangents sometimes. I don't know how much I should talk. So a friend of mine lives in Tulsa, and this just sums up, how I'm different, because as a guy that started with $1,000 in a computer, I've got to answer every phone call, turn over every rock. I never know where opportunity comes from, right? Because I'm an entrepreneur that has grown. And a friend of mine, he worked for a company that owned gun manufacturers all over the country, and he had a 60-person back office group in Florida, accounting jobs, HR jobs. He wanted to move it to Tulsa where he lived, and he called the Commerce Department. 4 days later, he got a return phone call. Okay. And they were like, well, if you do it, just let us know. And, no big deal. So he just kind of sat on it and said, well, that wasn't very exciting. They weren't even excited for me to move 60 jobs here. So he said, unrelated, but 6 months later, they ended up buying Daisy BB guns in Rogers, Arkansas. Okay. Everybody had a Daisy BB gun growing up. And he said, here's the difference. The day he closed on Daisy, the governor of Arkansas personally called him on his cell phone and was like, thanks for buying Daisy. We want you to know we're happy you're here. We want to help you expand in Arkansas. We love Daisy. Here's my cell number. You call me if you need anything, and we want to help you grow your company. So what did he do? He ended up moving the 60-person up to Rogers, Arkansas. They ended up buying another company in Missouri and closing that down and moving those 300 jobs to Rogers. So here's a little 60-person back office we poo-poo turns into 500 jobs, right? That's how business works, guys. We don't have to hit a home run every time. I can go after the 30-person companies and the 50-person companies because I know that the guy that starts with $1,000 can turn into a 1,000-person company. And so again, it's blocking and tackling. There's no real secret how to grow a company from $1,000 in a computer. There's no book on that. There's no book on how to turn your state around. If y'all can find that book, let me know. I'm looking for that. All right. Yes, sir.
You've mentioned accountability 11 times this morning, and I happen to think that's outstanding that you're using that word. And my question is, I've spent almost 50 years in the private sector. I've worked for large corporations and small sole proprietorships, etc. And my experience is, in the private sector, if you're not performing well, you're gone. My experience in observing the government and including the Oklahoma government, we've got some department heads who've lost, tens of thousands of dollars. They don't even know where they got it from the state, and they don't even know where it is. How about you draining the swamp when you get it? I mean, do you have the fortitude to fire some people that need to be fired?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, 100%. I was going to tell you another story, but
That's the only way.
Okay.
People are going to have to say, you know what, I better start working or I'm going to lose my job.
Yeah.
Because my experience is once they get there, it doesn't take but 6 months to go, oh, cool.
Well, the real deal, accountability and audits are one thing. Financial audits, we've got to know how the money's flowing, right? That's just basic. But a business person thinks about performance metrics, okay? Performance metrics. How many employees should the Department of Environmental Quality have? How many employees should the Attorney General's office have? How many employees should the Department of Transportation have? How many is it per road miles? That's a performance metric, folks. My opponents don't even know what I'm talking about when I talk about that. Here's the deal. My head of IT is a guy's named Steve Park. He runs our technology for our company. Great guy, really smart developer. He knows he can spin you in a circle talking about IT stuff, right? We have 44 employees in IT today, all right? If he was standing right here with us and we ask him, Steve, how many employees do you think we should have in IT? Do you think he thinks we should have more than 44 or less than 44? He thinks we ought to have more. No. He always thinks we should have more. He wants to have 100 people in IT. He always wants the latest and greatest and new developers. So my point is, if you don't know how to put performance metrics in place and hold the different agencies accountable, hold the different departments accountable, the government always thinks bigger budgets are better outcomes, right? And we have this big bloated administration, and you have to learn how to put those performance metrics in place. I'll do that as governor. Yes, sir.
There's been a lot of talk recently about criminal justice reform. What are your thoughts on that and what we need to do in the state?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you. And then I'll wrap up because I know we're probably running out of time. Criminal justice. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about, have you looked at human trafficking in Oklahoma and how out of control it is and how to address the law enforcement and helping with that because there are not enough of them.
Yeah. Okay. Let me okay. So criminal justice. The way I look at stuff, 1 to 50 states. Okay. 1 to 50 states. I figured we'd be about 25th, right? Did you know we're number 1 in incarceration rates? Number 1. Okay. We are doing something wrong. This is low-hanging fruit. We can make a big move on this. I met a lady in eastern Oklahoma who got sentenced to 45 years in prison. She had $200 worth of drugs. The amount of drugs could fit in the palm of your hand, and she had Sudafed on her possession. So they got her for manufacturing. She got 45 years. Another state would have given her a year or 2, right? So just from an economic standpoint, that'll cost us $1 million to incarcerate her. But then you think about all the unintended consequences, the foster care and all the other drags that go with heavy incarceration rate. There are better outcomes, folks. And 70% of Oklahoma's prisons are made up of people like that. People that we're kind of mad at. We're not really afraid of them. We're more mad at them. We incarcerate that group 80 to 100% more than the other states around us. And 30% of our prisons, they're people we're afraid of. And I've got to give our district attorneys, the prosecutors, the sticks they need to keep them in prison. But we've got to come up with better outcomes, folks. And the other thing is fines, fees, and court costs. It has spiraled out of control with us. It is a death spiral for poor people. Once they get in the system, it's hard to get out. I met a guy, and maybe you know, maybe you don't know. I didn't realize this was happening, but I met a guy who spent 10 years in prison, served his time. He's been out for 10 years. He's been a plumber. And he's still paying off $25,000 in fines, fees, and court costs. And most people give up, and then we reincarcerate them. We want these guys out paying taxes, right? Last story I'll tell you on that before I wrap up. A friend of mine has a roofing company, and he employs guys that have been incarcerated. He said it's all drug related. He goes, nice guys. They've worked for me a long time. Good guys. He goes, I have to give them payroll advances all the time. I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, well, just last week, one of my guys, he said, if I don't get $800 payroll advance when I meet with my parole officer, I'm going to get reincarcerated. Okay. This is a guy that you're bumping into at 7-Eleven or on Q, and he's swinging a hammer and paying taxes and working and making his truck payment and taking care of his kids. And then for $800, he gets back in the system, right? And loses his job, and all that stuff spirals out of control. So we have to think of this. And again, I don't have to be a genius. I've got to look at what the other states around me are doing. I'm number 1 in this, okay? I've got to be at least 25th, and I want to be at the bottom end of that category, right? They're asking for $800 million more to build new prisons, okay? So my point is, if you don't have an independent governor, folks, why hasn't this been addressed? Why hasn't it been changed? Well, the only one thing I can figure out is you follow the money. Who's benefiting? Is it the private prisons, or who benefits when those beds are full? Who's clothing them and who's feeding them? If you don't have a governor, guys, that is looking out for what's best for all 4 million Oklahomans, they never make a decision against this industry or special interest group because, man, I've got an election coming up. Oh, I can't really touch that. We got this deal coming up. And I'm just telling you, we're going to move this forward, and we're going to make some changes to move our state forward until we are top 10. So, last thing, let me wrap up here because I know we got to get. But anyway, I'll be here to we can talk. Yes, sir.
Courtable system in the military. I was in there for 27 years. Okay, but they're not addressing because the cost is so much per prisoner, probably 100,000 to 150,000 per prisoner per year, and we can't stop it.
Yeah.
Spend part of that money to keep prisoners
right
before they go in.
Yeah.
Okay. If we can do that, then we save a whole bunch of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, in closing, I can only meet 1% of the voters like this right here. And that's what's frustrating for me. I mean, I've done this for the last year. I'm only spending 1 day a month at my company. But because 99% of the people have to meet on television or social media. So I applaud you for coming to meeting the governor candidates because you guys have to decide who you want your next governor to be. Then you have to help us win this thing. And that's kind of how this thing spreads because, we only get to meet most people on television for 30 seconds and they don't really get to dig in and ask questions like what we're doing today. So you have to decide and you have to help us and you've got to tell your 20 friends and get the vote out on August 28th. You've got to financially help us. The maximum anybody can donate to a governor's campaign is $2,700. So we ask our friends to max with us or do $1,000 or $500 or whatever they can do to help us win it. And then I do one other thing. I've never asked anybody to do anything that I'm not willing to do. And I match everything dollar for dollar. So if you give me $1 in my campaign, I'm going to put $1 in. So far, we have raised more than any other candidate in the entire race since we got started because people are just ready for change. So help me win it. These guys in the back have all kinds of information where you can help us door knock or make phone calls, financially help us. And make sure we get the vote out on August 28th. And if you guys do not like me, tell all your out-of-state friends about me, okay? Thank y'all so much for being here.